If you've had your gallbladder removed, you were probably told that the gallbladder doesn't really do anything anyway, so we might as well just yank it out. But the reality is that the gallbladder is quite important, and taking it out can create some real health challenges and even some annoying symptoms. But you are able to take some steps to improve those issues and optimize how your body's working. So in this video, we're going to talk about 6 simple steps that you can start right now to either correct issues that may have shown up once your gallbladder was removed, or to avoid those problems from starting. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
What's tricky about symptoms that can come from gallbladder removal is that they sometimes don't show up for months or even years, and people don't even correlate that they came from the fact that the gallbladder was removed. So I'm going to explain how the gallbladder works and its functions, and I don't want you to get too worked up about the fact that somebody talked you into having yours removed. It may have needed to come out. What's important now is to understand its functions so you know and understand the steps that you can take to improve your situation now. When we eat food, our stomachs make hydrochloric acid, or HCl. And this HCl helps us break down that food so that we can pull all the nutrients out of that food. Now, once the food is properly acidified, it leaves the stomach and goes into the duodenum, which is the first 10 inches of the small intestine. Now, once it's there, the gallbladder squirts alkaline bile down onto this acidic product. So bile is this soapy substance that was made by the liver, and then it's stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. And it's that concentrating action that makes that bile more effective for our digestive processes. So the acid product leaves the stomach, and then this alkaline product comes down and it neutralizes the acids that just left the stomach. So when this alkaline product meets the acid stuff, it creates this sizzle. This sizzle is what really helps us bust that food apart and access all the nutrients in that food. It helps us turn the food into vitamins and minerals and amino acids and broken down fats that the body can use. So this sizzle is really crucial for us to be able to turn our food into fuel and resources. Without this sizzle, we don't have the ability to really digest our food correctly, and then our food may break down by process of rotting and fermenting, or we may not be able to pull all the nutrients out of that food, and it can create nutrient deficiencies. Now, a common occurrence with gallbladder removal is the symptom of chronic diarrhea. Now, not everyone who has their gallbladder removed is going to experience chronic diarrhea. It just happens to be the most common significant symptom that shows up. And it shows up because this acid product, it was supposed to be acid in the stomach because the stomach is made to hold those acids. But once it leaves and goes into the small intestine, those acids need to be neutralized by alkaline bile coming down from the gallbladder. It's this bile that neutralizes the acids, and if they don't get neutralized properly, those acids continue to move through the intestinal tract and they can digest the intestinal tract. Well, the body doesn't want you digesting a hole through your intestinal tract, so it says we got to get this out of here, and it brings all the water it can to cool these acids off, and it rushes it out the back door in a big hurry when this chronic diarrhea issue. Now, that can restrict our ability to assimilate nutrients even more because all the food is rushing through the system so quickly. So this is a significant problem with a lost gallbladder. Even if you're not experiencing chronic diarrhea, without enough bile there to meet that acid product and create that real sizzle, it restricts the ability to really pull all the nutrients out of the food. So that brings us to step 1, which is digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes we have in our body, and they help us break down our food every time we eat. A lot of foods contain enzymes in them to help us break down those particular foods. The problem is most enzymes are killed if the food is cooked or processed, and that's pretty much most of what we're eating most of the time. So we need to often supplement with digestive enzymes to give our body what it needs to really help us break our food down. Now, if we've lost that sizzle, we really need digestive enzymes so that we can take any measure that we can to give our digestion a boost. So digestive enzymes can be very helpful, and especially lipase. Lipase is the enzyme we use to help us break down fats. And bile is what our body uses to emulsify fats. Emulsify is how we break down these fats so that the body can use them. If we can't break down our dietary fats, they can rot and ferment and become a burden that the body now has to deal with. The way that the body deals with that a lot of times is to either push it out through the skin, creating skin issues or acne, or it'll take those undigested fats and store them in fat cells, and now our pants are expanding, and that's not always so fun. So supplementing with some type of broad-based digestive enzyme that includes lipase is a great way to give your digestion a boost and increase your ability to access the nutrients in the food that you're eating. Step number 2 is to supplement with ox bile or purified bile salts. This can be really important because of that fact that we need bile to emulsify our fats. We also want to create that sizzle any way that we can. Now, a lot of people that have lost their gallbladder will still have a small amount of bile trickling down into the intestinal tract kind of all the time. It's not going to the gallbladder to be stored anymore because the gallbladder is gone, but the liver still produces bile, and if it's flowing down the biliary pathway correctly, it'll still go into the intestinal tract and help us emulsify our fats a little bit. It can help us kind of neutralize those acids a little bit. Now, it may not work as effectively, but it can still help a little bit as long as the person's bile is flowing correctly. But since you don't have that bolus of bile coming down to neutralize the acids and really get that sizzle, it can be really beneficial to supplement with ox bile. Now, what's really important and a huge mistake that most people make, it's the timing of taking that ox bile. Most people say, hey, just take this ox bile with every meal that you have and it'll help you digest those foods. The problem is, like we talked about, bile is alkaline. So our food needs to be acidified in our stomach before it moves into the intestinal tract. So if you're taking an alkaline supplement like bile, you're neutralizing your acids in the stomach before your food has a chance to break down correctly. So that's why we like to see people take ox bile away from their food. A good plan is to maybe eat your food and then 2 to 3 hours later, after the food has had a chance to acidify, you can take the ox bile then. Now, most people are going to need to adjust the timing or the dose of that ox bile a little bit, and we teach people how to do that in our free digestion course. We'll put the link to that free course in the description below this video. And the course actually has an entire page of videos just for people who've lost their gallbladder and need to figure out how to do the dosing and the timing and the best way to figure out what's going to work for them. So that'll be a big help. Now, if you are dealing with chronic loose stool issues, ox bile is a great way to slow that down because the alkaline bile will help neutralize the acids that are coming from the stomach. But even if you're not dealing with loose stool issues, ox bile can be really important to help you really digest your food correctly. Step number 3 is to spread your dietary fats out throughout the day instead of eating a large portion of dietary fats at once. If your bile is flowing from your liver correctly, it can just be trickling down into the intestinal tract a little bit at a time. So if you have a large amount of dietary fat in one meal, you may not have enough bile to emulsify and break down those fats correctly. And again, when fats don't get broken down correctly, they become a problem and a burden to the body. You don't want the body pushing undigested fats out through pores in your skin and creating skin issues, and you don't want the body shoving undigested fats into fat cells. So if you can spread those fats out, that'll help you emulsify more fats. Now, if you're using ox bile, you'll be able to consume a little more fats in a meal and just use the ox bile to help you emulsify those fats. But if you're not using ox bile, you really want to spread those out, and that's going to help a lot. Step number 4 is to supplement with some coconut oil. Coconut oil seems to process a little bit differently than most dietary fats. It contains a lot of MCTs, and MCTs process differently and don't need so much bile to be broken down and used correctly. So if you can use some coconut oil, that can give your body more fats that it needs. We really need to consume dietary fats in order for our body to let go of stored fat. If the body isn't getting the fats it needs for a lot of different functions, it'll hold on to stored fat like money in the bank. So you want to give the body the fats that it needs, and by supplementing with a little bit of coconut oil, then you can give your body fats that are easier to process. Coconut oil is great to cook with, but you can also just eat half a teaspoon after every meal just to give yourself a little bit more dietary fat. Now you can turn it into a really small fat bomb with some flavors if you can't handle just eating the coconut oil, but I like it now. I'm just used to doing it and it tastes good to me. So figure out what works for you, but supplementing with some coconut oil can be really beneficial. Step number 5 is to supplement with fat-soluble vitamins. Remember, we need to consume enough fats and to be able to digest them correctly to be able to assimilate fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins that we really need. So if we're not eating as much fat, or we're spreading it out throughout the day, or we're not having the ability to emulsify those fats correctly, we really want to supplement with some fat-soluble vitamins to get them into the system a little bit easier. Especially fat-soluble vitamins like D, E, and K. Just don't go overboard with vitamin D like most people suggest. Too much vitamin D can be just as problematic as not enough vitamin D. So that free course that we talked about, where we put the link in the description below, that can walk you through figuring out if you need more D, or if maybe D you're taking too much and you're causing problems. Step number 6 is to ensure your biliary pathway is flowing correctly. Remember, we talked before that sometimes people have their gallbladder removed, but as long as the biliary pathway is moving, then the bile is moving down the intestinal tract, and that helps us digest food. But it's also crucial because toxins and filth that the liver filters out of the body, it puts it into the bile. And then it sends that bile down to the intestinal tract so those filth and toxins can go out the back door. But if your bile isn't flowing correctly, which is very common, then those toxins aren't being removed. So you really want to make sure that biliary pathway is flowing, because sometimes bile becomes so thick and sticky that it doesn't flow correctly. And there's a lot of things in our world and in our food and in our life that can thicken up our bile. And bile, when it gets too thick and sticky to flow correctly, the gallbladder just keeps concentrating it, and it can concentrate it into stones, and then all of a sudden we have to have our gallbladder removed. So if you had to have your gallbladder removed because of gallstones, it's very likely that bile was too thick and sticky to flow correctly. So they'll remove the gallbladder, but they often don't check to see, is the biliary path clear? If the gallbladder got really backed up, it can also back up into that biliary pathway as well. So the gallbladder can be removed, and the person's like, hey, I have another gallbladder attack. And they're like, oh, it's just a phantom thing. It's in your head. You're like losing a limb and you think it's still there. It's just a phantom pain. The reality is the pain is real because the biliary duct is blocked, and that's causing a severe pain, and a person can have a gallbladder attack even though their gallbladder is already gone. So you might want to take steps to make sure that bile is moving. And we like to see people use a product called Beet Flow from Empirical Labs because it helps thin the bile so that it can flow better. And we also have other steps that we could do if the problem is really significant. And we teach how to do those steps in our free 4-week digestion course. Steps like coffee suppositories or coffee enemas that can help open up or dilate that biliary pathway so any blockages can move through correctly. But you really want to make sure that's flowing correctly because you want to be able to emulsify the fats that you're eating, and you want the toxins that the liver is filtering out to be able to move out the back door. We'll also put a link in the description below for our video for how to do a Beet Flow flush to thin bile. That can be a really helpful move as well. Now, if this information has been helpful to you, be sure to click the like and subscribe button because that helps more people find this video. And it's very common for us to find people who've had their gallbladder out for decades and they've never been told this information. So help other people find their answers as well. Now, don't forget to check the link in the description below for that free digestion course. That'll really help you walk through figuring out what's going to be the best steps for you. Now, keep in mind that when you have your gallbladder removed, you really want to optimize liver performance any way that you can. So for now, watch our video on 5 mistakes that could be trashing your liver so you can gain more insights there. I can't wait to hear about your results.